Hello everyone, I'm JJ, and welcome to Radiotech Academy. Today we'll talk about the second part of our educational series and explore what happens when an X-ray beam hits your body. In this episode, we're going to understand exactly how photons interact with tissues, where their energy is deposited, and how this leads to dose formation and the resulting chemical and biological effects. Through clear examples and a step-by-step explanation of the dose pathway, we'll see how a single photon interaction can trigger a chain of reactions inside our cells. In the previous episode, we discussed what happens when an X-ray photon leaves the tube and reaches the body. There are three possible outcomes. It can pass through, be absorbed, or scatter, each resulting from different physical phenomena such as the photoelectric effect and Compton scattering. But the main question is, when these interactions happen inside the material, meaning inside the body, what actually occurs? Where does the energy carried by the radiation go? How does it create a dose? And most importantly, how do these interactions set the stage for subsequent chemical and biological effects? This episode addresses exactly that. The physical consequences of radiation interacting with matter. It sits at the intersection of pure physics and radiation biology. Every time a photon collides with an atom, and one of the previously mentioned interactions occurs, example, photoelectric or Compton, the result is the same. A high-energy electron is released. These electrons are called secondary or scattered electrons because they themselves become active particles that can interact with other molecules. Imagine throwing a small stone into water. At first, you only touch one point, but the waves spread outward from that point. Secondary electrons behave the same way. They start at one point and trigger a chain of collisions around them. Every time these electrons collide with another molecule, one of the following may happen. The molecule becomes ionized. An electron is removed. Or, it gets excited, electrons move to a higher orbit without being removed. The result? A multitude of ions, free electrons, and unstable molecules around the path. This is what we call the ionization chain. The freed electron travels a path until its energy is exhausted and it stops. In physics, this path is called the particle range. In the body, because of its relatively high density and closely packed molecules, this path is very short. For example, an electron with energy around 100 kilo-electron-volt typically travels only a few tenths of a millimeter in soft tissue. This means it loses most of its energy very close to the point of origin, depositing it locally. That's why we say indirect radiation like X-rays and gamma rays are long-range radiation. But the electrons they produce have short ranges and create localized doses. The higher the photon's initial energy, the more energetic the secondary electrons, and thus their range slightly increases, but still remains in the millimeter range. During their path, these electrons may collide multiple times with various molecules, transferring parts of their energy each time, like a car gradually slowing down with repeated brakes. Ultimately, when their energy runs out, that point is where the radiation energy is deposited. This is what we call the absorbed dose in medical physics. Interaction with water molecules, the primary source. The human body is approximately 70% water. Therefore, when an electron or radiation enters the body, it's most likely to collide with water molecules rather than proteins or DNA. Here's something very important happens. Water molecules become ionized, meaning electrons are removed and their structure changes. A series of unstable compounds are formed called free radicals. These are atoms or molecules with an unpaired electron and are extremely reactive. Some of the most important free radicals produced include hydroxyl radical, hydrogen radical, occasionally hydrogen peroxide. Important note, these radicals are not radiation themselves, but can carry the radiation's effect by attacking other molecules, like proteins or DNA, breaking bonds. This is why most radiation damage is indirect, mediated by radicals rather than direct photon collisions with critical molecules. Let's speak about direct versus indirect interactions. Direct interaction: radiation hits a sensitive molecule like DNA directly, breaking chemical bonds. This occurs more with heavy radiation such as alpha particles due to their high energy density. Indirect interaction: radiation first interacts with water, generating free radicals, which then attack DNA or other vital molecules. About 70 to 80% of biological damage comes from this pathway. The actual effect of radiation resembles a domino sequence. Radiation makes water ionization, and we have free radical production, an attack on vital molecules as results cellular damage. Now the important point. In this session, what is the real meaning of dose in physics? In medical physics, dose refers to the energy transferred by radiation to a unit mass of tissue. Now that we understand how this energy initiates reactions and where it is deposited, dose becomes a more tangible concept. 1. Absorbed dose. Simple definition: energy deposited by radiation per unit mass of tissue. Photons enter the body, secondary electrons are released, free radicals are generated, and all this energy is deposited in a point or region. Example: during a pelvic X-ray, suppose the absorbed dose is approximately 0.6 millisievert. This energy is deposited in the pelvic tissue. Feature: only the amount of energy is considered. Tissue sensitivity is not yet accounted for. 2. Equivalent dose. Simple definition: some types of radiation, like alpha particles, are very damaging even with low energy. Equivalent dose adjusts the absorbed dose using a radiation weighting factor to show the actual biological effect. Before we begin explaining the dose formulas, it is important to understand a key concept in radiation physics: radiation weighting factor WR. It is a number that indicates how biologically harmful a type of radiation is relative to a reference, usually X-rays. Even if two types of radiation deposit the same amount of energy, their effects on living tissue can be very different. WR weights the absorbed dose to reflect this difference, allowing us to calculate the equivalent dose, which shows the true biological impact. Radiation weighting factor for different radiation types, X-rays equals 1, that use in routine medical imaging, relatively low biological effect. Gamma rays, with WR equals 1, that use for the cancer treatment and nuclear imaging, long-range radiation. Alpha particles with WR equals 20, that highly damaging short-range used in targeted radiation therapies. But X-rays and gamma rays have same WR, because both are low LET linear energy transfer radiation. They deposit energy sparsely along their path, causing less biological damage per unit energy. High LET radiation like alpha particles deposits energy densely along a short path, causing more severe damage. Therefore, the amount is 20. Key point: understanding WR is essential before calculating equivalent dose and effective dose. It ensures that we account not only for energy deposited, but also for the biological effect of different radiation types. Currently, we deal with X-ray radiation, and all dose calculations are based on this type of radiation. Now we're going to understand the formula. Equivalent dose equals absorbed dose multiplying radiation weighting factor. As we have already learned, the radiation weighting factor WR is 1 for X-rays and gamma rays, and 20 for alpha particles. For example, pelvic X-ray. We assume the absorbed dose is 0.6 millisievert. Radiation weighting factors for X-ray equals 1. As a result, the equivalent dose equals 0.6, multiplying 1 equals 0.6 millisievert. And as another example, small alpha exposure on skin. Absorbed dose equals 0.1 millisievert. So equivalent dose equals 0.1 multiple 20 equals 2 millisieverts. Higher biological effect. 3. Effective dose. Simple definition. The body has organs with different sensitivities to radiation. Effective dose sums these contributions to give a single number representing the potential overall biological impact. How is the effective dose of each organ calculated? Effective dose equals equivalent dose multiplied by tissue weighting factor, WT. Now we have something called total effective dose, which is the sum of the effective doses of all organs. Now in the table below, you will see tissue weight factors WT examples for each organ. For example, and referring to the table above for tissue weight factors WT, we have in kidney equivalent dose about 10 millisieverts. As result, effective dose equals 10 x 0.05 equals 0.5 millisievert. With lung equivalent dose about equals 15 millisievert. As result, effective dose equals 15 times 0.2 equals 1.8 millisievert. So that means the effective dose of each organ is as follows. Kidney 0.5 millisievert and lung 1.8 millisievert. The total effective dose of the whole body is sum both of them. So then here, total effective dose equals kidney effective dose plus lung effective dose equals 23 millisievert. This shows the overall radiation exposure effect on the whole body. Now factors affecting dose. Type of radiation: X-ray, gamma, alpha, tissue density and distance to radiation source. Number of imaging procedures, patient weight and size. Some effective dose calculations depend on body weight. What is the safe ranges? These are the safe effective dose ranges for a specific imaging type. Even if repeated several times per year, the biological risk remains low. The purpose of this table is to show how many times per year a typical person can safely have each type of imaging without exceeding safe limits. Effective dose per exam is calculated based on absorbed dose and tissue sensitivity. Annual maximum exams are calculated based on Alara principle and the 20 millisievert year safety limit for adults. Example, abdominal X-ray equals 0.7 millisievert. That means up to 28 times per year is safe. But abdominal CT equals 8 millisievert. That means only 2 times per year is safe. Practical use. Choose imaging type. Example, abdominal X-ray or pelvis CT. Check the effective dose per exam. Based on annual safe limits, 20 millisievert, calculate maximum annual frequency. Consider organ-specific doses for sensitive tissues, eye, thyroid, lungs. Always follow Alara principle. Perform imaging only when necessary and with minimal dose. So then, the dose formation pathway is briefly as follows. When X-rays hit the human body, high-energy photons penetrate the tissues. These photons collide with the atoms of the body and release secondary electrons. Next, the free electrons interact with the water molecules inside the cells and create highly reactive particles known as free radicals. These free radicals can damage proteins, cell membranes, and even the DNA inside the cells. This chain of interactions leads to the storage of radiation energy within a specific part of the tissue. In simple terms, a dose is formed when radiation energy becomes locally stored in the body tissue and leaves both physical and biological effects. To summarize, the process of dose formation happens in several continuous steps. First, photons enter the body. Then secondary electrons are released. After that, these electrons interact with water molecules. This reaction produces free radicals which damage the cells and their DNA. Finally, the radiation energy becomes stored in the tissue and the absorbed dose is formed. Practical example for dose understanding. To better understand the difference between dose types, let's compare two situations. Pelvic X-ray. In this case, radiation energy is absorbed only in the pelvic region. The absorbed dose is usually around 0.6 millisieverts. Since the type of radiation is X-rays with a radiation weighting factor of 1, the equivalent dose is also 0.6 millisieverts. Because only the pelvic area is exposed and its tissue sensitivity is relatively low, the effective dose remains roughly the same. But in CT scan of abdomen and pelvis, in this case the absorbed dose can reach approximately 8 millisieverts. Since the radiation type is still X-rays WR equals 1, the equivalent dose is also about 8 millisieverts. However, in this kind of imaging, several internal organs such as the liver, kidneys, stomach, and intestines are exposed simultaneously, each with different tissue weighting factors. For example, stomach 0.12, kidneys 0.05, liver 0.05. When the contributions from each organ are calculated and summed, the total effective dose is typically around 7 to 8 millisievert. In simple terms, because CT scans of the abdomen involve major internal organs, much of the radiation energy is deposited in sensitive tissues, so the effective dose is almost equal to the absorbed dose. This amount is several times higher than the dose from a standard pelvic X-ray, which is only about 0.6 millisievert. Ionization chain and energy stop. Every photon entering the body releases an electron. That electron collides and produces new electrons. The ionization chain continues until energy is exhausted. Electron energy is transferred to nearby molecules, forming a local dose. Dose is always localized along the radiation path, not spread evenly across the body. DNA and biological effects. DNA, the cell's instruction manual, containing protein codes and cellular functions. Direct interaction. Radiation breaks DNA chemical bonds directly. Indirect interaction. Free radicals attack DNA. Most damage, 70 to 80%, comes from indirect paths. Role of doses. Absorbed dose determines how many free radicals are produced. Equivalent dose reflects the effect of more damaging radiation on DNA. Effective dose shows the overall potential for mutation or cell death. Practical examples: CT abdomen, absorbed dose in kidney and liver high, but effective dose low. DNA risk minimal. Dental X-ray, very low dose, almost no DNA effect. Summary and conclusion. Photons enter the body and transfer their energy. Secondary electrons transfer their energy to molecules. Water molecules ionize, producing free radicals. Radicals attack DNA and other molecules. Doses absorbed, equivalent, effective define the amount of energy and biological impact. Dose, localization, and energy distribution vary with tissue type and radiation path. Understanding doses helps determine which imaging procedures are safe and how. And that's it for this episode. In the first part of the series, we explored the physics of radiation, how photons behave through effects like the photoelectric effect and Compton scattering. In this second part, we went deeper, understanding how energy turns into dose, how that dose forms inside the body, and what it means for biological systems. In the next episode, we'll take the next big step, from dose formation to dose effects, exploring how radiation doses actually change cells, DNA, and even lead to biological responses, such as mutation, repair, or cell death. Thank you so much for watching and staying with me until the end. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. It really helps us keep creating science that connects physics to life. See you in the next episode.